question. There are some groups in Sri Lanka who say that now Sri Lanka is at the time of making a new constitution, and some of the groups are saying that, claiming that the UK with the Western forces are forcing Sri Lanka to have a new constitution. Is it true that the UK and with the Western forces are forcing into making of a new constitution according to your liking? And I think our Sri Lankan government made an invitation to our Prime Minister to visit Sri Lanka. Will he visit Sri Lanka?
Well, I'd say the first thing, I'd be very curious if the United Kingdom was pressing on Sri Lanka to have a new constitution, because the United Kingdom does not have a written constitution itself. So no is the answer. What I have seen and welcome is the fact that the government have decided to turn the whole House of Parliament into a committee, parliamentary committee for the constitution, and that will give everyone the ability to have their say. I think it's important that all stakeholders are consulted in these constitutional changes, and I think there are some long-term issues which should be addressed within these constitutional changes. And I think you highlight a very good point, if I might say so, which is the government is taking on a lot on its plate. It's got the constitutional changes. It's trying to deal with the families who want closure on the disappeared, on some kind of restitution. It's on the legal process. It's trying to right the economy during a very vulnerable international period with collapsing oil prices, which could have knock-on effects. So it's really taking on a lot. But I think this is a government with huge commitment and huge energy who will actually deliver on what they've promised. On the issue of the Prime Minister David Cameron, well, of course, he is a passionate supporter of this process. Indeed, he must take some credit for getting this thing going. Of course, when he came out for CHOGM, I was with him in December 2013, and I think for us as the UK, old friends of this country, it was a difficult time for us. We weren't particularly popular, some of us at that time, you may remember, in the press. But the PM went up to Jaffna, and shortly after coming back, he then had a meeting with the President, at which he was very clear in what he thought had gone wrong here and what ought to happen. And so the Prime Minister is personally invested in Sri Lanka. I don't mean financially, I mean personally invested emotionally and intellectually with what is going on here, and I'm sure he would want to come here. And the Prime Minister has again asked me to ask him if he will come here, and I'm sure once we have a few domestic things out of the way, like a small matter of a referendum on the EU, the Prime Minister will want to travel a bit more, and I'm sure Sri Lanka will be right at the top of his list.
Local television channel. I have two questions. The first thing is, yesterday the Prime Minister was saying that Sri Lanka would repeal its Prevention of Terrorism Act and would seek British assistance in redoing the PTA once again with the UK assistance. And the second thing is, there was a talk previously that the UK government was helping in hand to train the Sri Lankan armed forces or to facelift the Sri Lankan armed forces. Would you please respond to these questions? Thank you.
Yes, I think on the first issue, I mean, I've said to the Prime Minister, on behalf of my Prime Minister, that we are ready to assist Sri Lanka and the government in any way we can. And if there are areas from legislation on prevention of terrorism, and of course we've had our own debates and legislation in the UK on this. If there's anything we can help, we will, of course, do that. And that's right across the board. In terms of the defence engagement specifically, we would very much like to re-engage. We are re-engaging on this level. We have what we call a non-resident defence attaché based in Delhi, who comes down here already and is beginning to make contacts. And it's all part of what we're doing in other countries. So Burma, what we call Burma, what some of you may call Myanmar, it's the same issue where we are engaging with the military to teach the military really our own experiences in the UK, where the military's role is first and foremost to defend a country's borders, and it needs to learn, every military should learn in a democracy how to operate within a democratic environment, responsible to the democratically elected government of the day. And so we will be bringing that training, how a modern army can operate in the 21st century in a democratic country. I think that's hugely important. I think the other thing I would say on a positive note is we very much welcome the commitment of this government to do more in terms of international peacekeeping. There are already Sri Lankan armed military in Africa and so forth, and we in the UK and the United States and other countries feel that too often we have to do the heavy lifting in terms of international peacekeeping operations, and so we ask our friends around the world to step up to the plate to do their fair share, and I have every indication from the Prime Minister that he would like the Sri Lankan military to do more peacekeeping. I think that's good for the military. I think it's good for Sri Lanka's international reputation.
Is the British considering any kind of defence pact with Sri Lanka at the moment?
I think that what we're considering at the moment is, we've talked a little bit about earlier, we've just got the first toe in the water is to re-establish contacts. We were doing that through a non-resident defence attaché, and that's an important move. But it's certainly too premature to talk about anything like that. We're in the very early stages of seeing how we can help the Sri Lanka army, how it can operate as a modern army in a democratic country responsible to the democratically elected leaders of that country. Work, as I've said, we're doing elsewhere in places like Burma, and we're going to be running some courses here, I think, in Sri Lanka. And then gradually, as things improve and we get to know each other better, we can look at other options, training options and so forth. But the first thing we need to do is to absolutely concentrate on how an army should behave, human rights issues and so forth, which we have expertise in.